Every leader eventually hits the same wall. The strategy's solid, the people are talented, but progress against your strategy still feels harder than it should. That's a communication problem. And the best companies don't move faster because they work harder. They move faster because of the clarity of their narrative. And at scale, clarity doesn't happen by accident. It has to be designed. And when it comes to leadership communication in particular, clarity is what turns complexity into trust and action. And when you can do that, when your communication has clarity, every message you share becomes leverage. People understand faster, teams act sooner, investors buy in deeper. The most effective leaders I've met build a system that turns complex ideas into aligned action. That system is the narrative blueprint. And in this video, I'll show you exactly how to build it for yourself so your strategy turns into results faster than ever before because clarity and alignment start becoming automatic. I'm Ben Rosner, and for the past 15 years, I've helped leaders across the military, Fortune 500 companies, and fast-growing startups do exactly that. Take the most complex, high-stakes strategies and turn them into communication systems that create trust and drive results. And here's what I've learned. Great leaders go beyond communicating decisions. They engineer understanding. They design the message, the meaning, and the movement behind every initiative so that trust is built in. This is part 3 of my 6-part mini-series on the executive communication system. And today, we're building what I call the narrative blueprint, a tool used by the most influential companies in the world to turn vision, mission, and strategy into trust, momentum, and action at scale. Because when a company lacks a clear narrative, here's what happens. Teams confuse movement with momentum and progress. Strategy meetings repeat the same priorities, and the market can't tell what you stand for. But when the narrative is clear, people know why their work matters. Every message feels consistent, and your company's direction starts to pull people forward, employees, customers, investors alike. That's alignment by design. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to build your own corporate narrative to turn purpose into performance. So let's get right into it. Today, we're going to discuss how we turn complex ideas into trust and action at scale through the narrative blueprint. And so you're probably wondering, like, why should I even care about this? Well, here's the bottom line when it comes to getting your narrative right, getting your corporate narrative right. The very first thing is that strategic narratives are the glue that create consistency and understanding and purpose in organizations. There needs to be a situation in which everyone understands what they need to do and that they hear it over and over and over again from a consistent perspective, because otherwise it's impossible to get any type of aligned action from the people that we lead. They need to have a feeling that, okay, this really is what is driving us, and I'm hearing it over and over again, and that's why I really need to follow this approach. The thing is, as well, is that teams and organizations, they need a vision and a mission, a North Star that unifies the direction and aligns every decision and message and action. This is very closely tied with the next point, which is that when you have a vision and mission that's clear, you know why you exist, you know what you need to do to get there, it helps everybody understand what are the actions that I need to take to help the company achieve these goals. What is the grand vision that we're trying to create in the world? And this is important because this ultimately ends up motivating people, attracting the best talent in the industry, make sure they stay as well. And everybody moves in the same direction so that strategy turns into results faster, because it's important to understand the best talent in the world, while everybody wants money, it's not the only thing they're motivated by. They want a sense of purpose. They want a sense of impact. They want to understand that their individual actions ladder up to something that is bigger than themselves and that they have an integral part in achieving that. And so that vision and mission ties in very closely with motivating people. And so that's what we mean. We need to be able to help create that sense of purpose through our communication. And in addition to that, that's on the internal side. When it comes to external, it ends up attracting the right customers, not everyone's right, and the right investors. Because when your purpose resonates with their beliefs and their aspirations, they want to become part of the change you're creating. So if we look at Apple, for example, before that, you had other types of computers. But Apple came and said, look, we're not just creating another personal computer. We're here to create a movement where people who are creative and push boundaries and they don't fit in a box. That is who we create our products for. That is what we want to help them achieve. And so naturally, you're pulling in the right people to buy this product because they resonate with the belief that you have, the why of what it is that you're trying to create in the world. And look, if these positives don't help you, at least understand the negative implications of all this. Because if you don't define your own narrative, what's going to happen is that your competitors, industry analysts, and the media, they'll do it for you. And you probably won't like the version that they end up creating. And so, if anything, that should provide the incentive and understanding of why this is so important for you to get right. But before we get going, I want to talk about definitions. This might be one of the most important things that I've created in a very long time because the language we use matters. And when it comes to creating any type of communication, people conflate terms. And it's not out of malice, they just don't understand, or we try to use certain words over and over again when we mean something else. So, for example, you might hear this all the time. Hey, we need to get our story right. We need to get our narrative right. What's our messaging? What are we saying? Well, how maybe we should incorporate storytelling into this. But what does that stuff even mean? And because if we don't understand and have a shared language of what we mean by each and every one of these terms, it's very hard to actually put something together. And so this ends up feeling like fluff and something that doesn't actually move anything, just something we need to do a check mark next to say that we've done it so we can move on to work that we find more important. So let's get our definitions right and make this feel a lot more concrete. There's quite a bit here, but for the sake of today, we're going to deal with the top portion above the dotted line. So when we're talking about a corporate narrative, here's my definition of this. A corporate narrative is the combination of vision, mission, and strategy and why us, why now language to rally internal teams to a cause and attract external stakeholders by getting them to resonate with the purpose of the organization. So this has two components. First is that we have the vision, mission, strategy, why us language. That's what is the foundation of everything. But we want to be able to use this to both rally the people internally and attract people from an external perspective. That's what having a strong corporate narrative allows you to do. So there are terms even within that. So let's keep going. When I say vision, I'm talking about the ideal future that the company is trying to create. So this is a situation in which the outcome is yet to be determined, and it depends on the actions of those who wish to achieve it. The vision is the ideal future you want to create. It does not exist today. And so it literally requires the people internally and external to make that a reality by the actions they need to take. The mission, however, because people conflate this stuff all the time, vision, mission, and they mix it up. The mission in particular are the actions that the company takes every day to make that vision a reality. So the vision is the ideal future, and the mission is what we do every single day to be able to achieve that vision. Then comes strategy. And the definition that we're going to use here is that strategy is the prioritization of limited resources against unlimited options, meaning there's only so much time and effort and money that we have set aside, but literally unlimited things that we could do with all of those resources. So how do we use them efficiently? That is what we decide to do with strategy. It's how we prioritize that time, that effort, those resources to ultimately allow us to be able to get from point A to point B as efficiently as possible. That is the strategy. And then lastly, why us, why now? So this is language of change that makes your vision feel inevitable and your mission feel urgent. So this is what ends up creating momentum. So when we combine all those those four things, the ideal future that we want to create, the steps that the company takes every single day to get there, the strategy, meaning how do we prioritize all our resources to do so, and lastly, why this matters and why we are specifically positioned to be able to make that happen. That's how you create a strong corporate narrative. That's what I mean by that. And while this is not for today, I do want to cover a couple additional things because there's also confusion around these terms, like I mentioned before. Positioning is also a word that gets thrown around a lot. And the way that I'll be using it in future videos is how do you define your space in the market and in the minds of your ideal customers. So not people who aren't relevant to you, but of all the different companies that exist in your space, in your industry, how do you define the way you show up in the minds of others when your company is mentioned? And not just anybody, and the ideal customer, those that you want to buy your product or service. Then we have messaging, also a term that gets thrown around all the time. But messaging in particular is the language that carries your narrative and positioning in every situation, and it is tailored to a specific stakeholder. So once we have that narrative from before, the corporate narrative of the vision and the mission and the strategy and why us and why now, in addition to the positioning, how we show up in the minds of our ideal customer, that language needs to show up again and again and again in a very consistent basis to all of the different stakeholders we have. And that needs to be tailored to that particular stakeholder because not everyone's the same and they need to hear the core message, but in a way that is specific to them. So we probably wouldn't talk the same to our investors or to the board in the same way we would talk to customers. And so we really need to figure out who is this audience, what do they need from us, and how can we communicate to them in a way that persuades them to take an action or influences them to change their mind. And that's where messaging is. How do we use the language that carries the narrative and positioning? Then we have story. People throw around the term story all the time. Tell your story. What is your story? Let's be clear. A story is a self-contained arc of events. It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. And it needs to be able to either provide a lesson or a realization to the audience. Okay, so for example, I talk all the time about one of the most negatively memorable parts of my childhood. It's what really got me into communication and language. And I tell the story of when I was 8 years old and I couldn't speak any English, and my family moved to the United States. And I had the worst school day of my life where I couldn't understand anybody. I couldn't buy myself lunch. And I sat on the floor of the school right at the front, and I cried myself cried myself silly and just because I didn't know what bus to take home. And so I treat communication in a way where it is more than just something I need to do. It is something I'm incredibly passionate about because I don't want anyone to feel that there's so much that they want to communicate. There's so much that's just in their head, but they don't have the words or they don't know how to go about the process of helping other people. And that's why I care about communication so much. And so that's an example of a story because it has a beginning, it has a middle, and has an end. But it also has a realization or a lesson there, something that I can talk about myself, why I care about communication in the first place. So that story, it's contained. Now, that is different than storytelling. Okay. Storytelling is a structured delivery mechanism by which we can communicate a key point or message in a way that moves or resonates with people logically and emotionally. So if the story is the self-contained specific arc of events, storytelling is the mechanism by which we deliver it. What is the tone? What is the pace? How do we put all of these different pieces together to create the middle, the beginning, middle, and end, and finish off with the lesson realization in a way that makes sense, in a way that is easily digested by the people we speak and speak to. That is storytelling. It's the delivery mechanism. So those are the terms that that I use. The way I define it, I'm certainly not going to pretend I'm the arbiter of truth or what this stuff should be, but I really believe that there needs to be definitions around these things to be able to have structured conversations and to actually achieve the strategy that we want. And so these are the definitions that I use. So when we look at corporate narratives, there are quite a few problems that they create when we don't do them right, when we don't have this set in the way that we want to. First and foremost, when it comes to weak corporate narratives, it creates misalignment across leadership and decision making. And this is particularly important because even in your senior leadership team, if we do not have the right corporate narrative, meaning we don't know the big vision we're trying to achieve, we don't have the mission, which are the specific steps we need to take. If we do not have the strategy, which is an understanding of how we prioritize our resources to get there, and we cannot rally those internally and externally around us, it makes it very difficult to understand what we're doing in the first place. And that trickles down to situations where there's friction, where there are moments where leadership has to take an action. We have to make a decision on our time, on our resources, on our direction. And if we don't have that exact alignment at the very top, there's absolutely no way when we get 3, 4, 5 levels down in our organization that that's going to work. But it all starts at the top. And if we are not crystal clear, we will not have strong decision making. After that, if there's a situation where leadership isn't aligned, well, it's no surprise that there's scattered communication and messaging. So if we're not completely aligned at the top, how can we communicate to all those below us, the various teams, to execute in the way we need them to? That alignment cascades all the way down in a really negative way. And when that happens, you end up getting low internal clarity and morale because people don't know what is expected of them. What is it that they want from me as an individual contributor or as a mid-level manager? And so that lack of clarity creates a morale issue in the company. And so then it's no wonder that you have a situation where teams and individuals don't understand their value and impact. And again, the best talent, and we're going, by the way, into a talent war. AI is going to replace so many jobs. And so those who still have jobs, they're going to be some of the best talent out there. And so for these individuals, they need a purpose. They need to understand what they're doing. I need to understand, how is a task that I'm doing over and over and over and over again every single day that is just grinding. It is just a grind to do. It is tons of hours every single day. How does my work translate to something that has a bigger purpose? How does it translate to the mission and to the vision? If they don't have that understanding, that's great. It's a huge issue. With teams, it's what makes it difficult to attract talent and then later on retain it. And it also ends up making the company a commodity. If there's no strong sense of purpose and of mission and of vision, it makes it very difficult to actually stand out in a way that gives you strong brand. For example, I could wear any white shirt. They're not expensive. I can find them anywhere. But if I put on a white, say that's a commodity, but if I put on a white t-shirt that has a Nike swoosh on it, now I'm part of this incredible mission. I'm an athlete. I'm someone who just gets stuff done. I'm someone who's going to fight and push through adversity. That is what I'm communicating with that brand association. And so it takes a white t-shirt and it no longer makes it a commodity. It makes it something unique and valuable because it's attached to meaning. And if we can't figure out what is that meaning, if we can't find a way to differentiate ourselves, if we just see, if we just create a situation where we're one of a million white t-shirts, you end up having a weak investor confidence. And that's just not going to work out in the long run. And I also want to make something incredibly clear. In addition to the definitions that I brought up before, I really want to be able to explain here and go in depth about the difference between narrative and story. Now, again, these are terms that are constantly conflated, but they mean very, very different things. So when it comes to a narrative, this is something that I consider open-ended. It is something to strive for and not yet achieved. It doesn't exist yet. And it's something that describes a future that we are building together. So open-ended, where we're trying to go, a future we're building together. And that is different than a story, because a story is, once, like we talked about before, it is self-contained with a beginning, middle, and end. It's not open-ended because it literally has a structure. And it describes an event that has already happened. So it's not something that we're going to strive towards to get to because it already happened. It's done. It's self-contained. And within a narrative, the audience is the protagonist because they play a role in creating that outcome, that incredible vision, versus when an audience hears a story. And in the story, the audience is an observer. They listen, they learn, they feel, just like when I tell my story about the worst day of my life. It's not some vision and incredible future we're trying to get to, but rather people are listening to what I went through. They learn, maybe even they feel bad for me. The point is, the audience is an observer. What we want to do with narratives is that it creates alignment for people and it creates momentum. But a story is really built to be able to create emotion or a moment of reflection for the person hearing it. And then lastly, a strong narrative can host many stories within it. Okay. If we have an ideal future that we're striving towards, I might have a lot of different stories and a lot of different anecdotes that I could provide and share that can get somebody aligned and ready to run through a brick wall to help achieve that ideal future. And in contrast, as a story, it ends once the lesson is learned. So once people understand that that is why I take communication so seriously. That is why this means so much to me. That is why is one of the main reasons I got into this in the first place. It's done and we can move on. And so that it's just important for me to help further differentiate what we mean by narrative and what we mean by story. And so that's why corporate narratives are open-ended. There is something that we have to go towards in the future. It's something that we use to create alignment. It is something that helps us as a communication vehicle hold a lot of stories that can push people in the direction we want them to go. So here's a quick example of what we need to do to create the perfect corporate narrative. And ultimately, for me, it is the engine of execution because it gets everybody aligned so well. So it's made up of 4 parts: vision, mission, why us, why now, and the strategy. And when we look at these 4 components, the vision is what defines the destination. Where are we going? This is the place that we need to get to. And the vision is something that helps us contain that. The mission is the map. So if the vision is the destination where we need to get to, the mission are the actions that we take every single day to be able to get there. So here's the map to get to that destination. Strategy ends up defining the movement. What are the steps every single day that we have to do when it comes to the prioritization of our resources to be able to use this map to get to this destination? And lastly, why is why now? That's our momentum. This is where we get people rallied around the cause. This is why you matter. This is why now is the time to get there. And when we do this right, and we're able to communicate this effectively, it makes your vision the right one to pursue. It makes the strategy make sense. It makes the mission worth doing. And the reason for doing so resonate internally and externally. There's so much power in getting this done the right way for the organization and for the market. When we look at it internally for the organization, there are quite a few benefits. Again, the most important one is creating that alignment around purpose. It creates the cultural buy-in and it creates that consistent direction. And I can't even count the number of leaders who have said, well, how do I build the right culture? How do I create something that people really want to rally around and they understand what I'm saying and they just drive every single day to execute as perfectly as possible so we can move to the results we want? This is it. People need to know where they're going, how they get there, how what they do matters, why it is that we're using our resources in this particular way to get there, and why they are the reason that the company can achieve these lofty goals. That is the bottom line. And so that's what ends up taking strategy and making it coordinated action. And when you have coordinated action, you can move faster than ever before towards your goal. But it doesn't stop there. When we look externally at the market, it helps sharpen perception. It helps clarify value. It helps position your company as the inevitable choice in its category. You're not a white shirt. You're the Nike swoosh. You're the ones who are going to get it done. You're the ones who are going to differentiate for yourself from everybody else. That is what this is going to help you do. And this establishes credibility. It creates the differentiation because you own the narrative of change in your industry. You're not letting others define it. You're not moving in the wind wherever it takes you. You define why you're the leader, and you're going to get everybody aligned in the company to help you get there. So I want to show you an example of Testline. So this is a combination of some publicly available materials, some SEC filings I was able to find to help put this together. And I also filled in the blanks on a lot of different spots. Not to mention that they also are one of the companies I've seen mix up mission and vision, but that's okay. We were able to put this together. It really is more important to understand the example itself and how all these things ladder up to be able to achieve the mission that they're driving towards so clearly, how they're able to get people aligned internally, how they have the market continue to back them. This is one of the strongest tools that they have to do so. So the first and foremost is the vision. What is that ideal future that they want to create? And it is first and foremost to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. It's a huge goal. It's a huge, lofty goal that is yet to be determined because it is open-ended. And it's going to take the actions of others to be able to get there. The mission is, so meaning what are the steps the company is going to take every single day to be able to achieve a situation where they can accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy? Well, Tesla's goal is to create the most compelling car company of the 21st century while making and accelerating the world's transition to electric vehicles by making clean energy accessible and mainstream. So the actions the company is going to take every day, they're very clear. They're going to create the most compelling car company of the 21st century. And the strategy meaning, what are the ways in which we're going to prioritize our resources to take these steps to achieve that vision? This kind of is a look back, but really Tesla began this entire process with a luxury electric car model to be able to prove that EVs could be both fast and desirable. So they began early on, not saying we're going to make something for the mass market. We're actually going to create a super high-end, unbelievably expensive vehicle. I believe it was the Roadster in 2008. But the long and the short is that they wanted to prove, hey, we can create a car that is as aesthetically pleasing, that is as powerful, and that is as reliable as a gas-powered car. And they did it, and they proved that out. And so while that was something that it was a price point that was well beyond most people's ability to buy, by being able to prove that point, it allowed them to then go more mainstream. And so they used that success to fund more affordable cars, as well as trucks and SUVs, while building massive factories to ultimately lower this cost. And so that is the way in which they prioritized their resources, their time, and their efforts. High-end luxury, then mass market, and making it accessible. And that is what they used to create the most compelling car company of the 21st century. And that is part of the way that they are going to achieve their vision of accelerating towards sustainable energy. Now, when it came to like, why us? Or why now? Of all the different companies out there, why are we the ones to do this? Well, the thing is, one of the ways in which Elon Musk really communicated this is to say, look, climate urgency is rising. And the thing is, legacy car makers, they're slow in adopting the changes that are needed to make an impact. We can't rely on them. And in contrast, we at Tesla, we have the technology, we have the team, and we have the scale to be able to lead that transition today for the tomorrow that we want to achieve. And so that is the way that you can rally all the people, both internally and externally, towards helping achieve that massive vision. And it's still something that they're pursuing today. It's not something that's changed over the last little while. Now, they're obviously including AI in different forms into helping transition, but to be able to create the most compelling car company, that is a massive goal. That vision is still something that is to be achieved. And every day they're working to refine the strategy and making sure that people understand why they're the right company to make that a reality. So that is an example. Here is the process so that you can do it yourself. Here is the narrative blueprint so that you can ask yourself the right questions to be able to achieve writing out the correct vision, mission, strategy, and the why us, why now. So the components are context, conflict, resolution, role, and a rallying cry. And they need to be able to answer some really important questions. We'll go one by one. So first, context. We need to be able to ask ourselves, what is changing in the world? What are the macro shifts? And at least for Tesla, we'll continue with that example. The world is running out of time to solve the energy crisis. Demand for mobility is rising, but the systems that power transportation today, they're still dependent on fossil fuels. So we have this tension that's being created here. So the demand is rising, but the system that power the transportation today still rely on fossil fuels. The conflict and tension and the risk that this ends up creating is that legacy automakers, they're trapped by slow innovation cycles and an approach, this is important, that prioritizes profit over progress. And the thing is, when we look at consumers, They want to be able to have something that provides performance and purpose. But the market only offers one or the other. And that's a huge issue. It's also the reason they went with that Roadster. They want to be able to prove it out. That is a process that clearly favors progress, but it's something that ultimately provided performance and purpose. Then we need to look at resolution, meaning what needs to exist now to solve this issue. And the answer is this: sustainable energy must be faster, it must be smarter, and it must be more desirable than the old way. That's critical, because otherwise, why would anybody change? And electric vehicles shouldn't feel like a sacrifice, but rather redefine excellence and quality and performance. So it shouldn't be a situation where you're saying, okay, well, to create a more sustainable future, I have to get a car that doesn't run as well, or doesn't go as far, or doesn't feel as good, or doesn't look as good. It shouldn't be that way. And in fact, we should redefine what excellence even means within this category. When we look at the role, and we need to ask ourselves, well, why are we uniquely equipped to lead the shift, right? Because there are a lot of different companies, a lot of different organizations. Why are we specifically the ones to make this happen? Well, Tesla is leading the transition to sustainable mobility by proving that electric vehicles can outperform gas cars, scaling production to make them affordable, and powering the ecosystem through batteries and recharging stations to make them accessible. And lastly here, what belief or call to action can unite people? And theirs is very clear: accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. When you put all these things together, you can much more easily create your vision, mission, and strategy in why us, why now language. So when you're also putting this portion together, here's some questions you can ask yourself as you're writing them out. You need to be able to take that blueprint I just showed you, answer those questions, start translating them to this portion. But here's what else you can ask yourself: what future for this vision? What do we want to create? What does that look like? And so here you need to describe the long-term destination your company is aiming towards. And it should be aspirational, it should be clear, and it should be enduring. This is your North Star. So not something that can easily be changed. The mission, which is, again, what do we do every day to move towards that future? So outline your core purpose and your daily focus. It should describe what the company does and why it matters in clear, concrete terms. For your strategy, how are we going to win? So we want to be able to summarize the big choices you've made to focus your resources and to differentiate. And so this is your plan of attack, not necessarily a list of tactics, but directional bets. And for example, for Tesla, the big directional bet was that they said, okay, we're actually going to try to create a car that can look as good, function as well, and just be as enjoyable as a gas car. Not make it for mass market. We don't care that it's going to cost over $100,000. That's a massive directional bet to be able to achieve something else. So it's not a list of tactics, but what are we trying to go towards? How are we going to use those resources? And lastly, why us? Why now? Why is this the moment? Why are we the right ones to lead the way? And so we want to be able to capture the timing and the conviction behind your narrative. So this is a piece that creates urgency. It inspires belief, and it aligns all of our stakeholders internally and externally, and it combines market conditions with your unique advantages. So if you can take that, you can look at the blueprint, the questions to ask yourself from a context, conflict resolution, role, and rallying cry perspective, and then ask the right questions as you piece together the vision, mission, strategy, and why us, why now language. You've created a corporate narrative that ultimately drives aligned action at scale, which is what we all want to be able to more quickly get to those results, because this, of all the things that we can do, this is what helps makes complex ideas stick, concepts clear and easy to understand, and inspires teams towards aligned action. So if you want to move faster than ever before, if you want to turn strategy into results, this is what everyone should invest in getting right. Because once you get this right, everything else flows: decision-making, aligned action, execution, understanding. It all comes from this. So I hope you found this of value. If this is something that you want to fix now so that you can communicate with clarity and turn your strategy into results faster than ever before, DM me 313 on Instagram or message me on LinkedIn. I have links below to both. In the next video, we're going to discuss the authority formula, which is where we're going to have a deep dive into how to build authentic executive presence so that you know for a fact every time that you speak and every time that you communicate, you do so not only effectively, but as yourself. And so I'm going to put the video somewhere around here. But until next time, keep leading with clarity.